Saturday's got football this weekend, and it's pro football in the NFL, so we got to separate it out. We got to do a Saturday video, a Sunday video, and of course, going to do, as we always do here on Splash Play, going to build lineups three ways. I'm going to hand build a lineup. First off, we get the advanced analytics from sites that I swear by, like Sports Info Solutions, Pro Football Reference, and all the other key data that we look at. Second up, we're also going to optimize lineups after looking at the projections and ownership projections from Stochastic. The Fantasy Cruncher Optimizer will tell us where the math is going to push people towards for this Saturday DraftKings slate. And last but not least, we're going to sim lineups to try to use the RY and all that to figure out who are the must plays for Saturday on DraftKings. Let's get into it. And I got to tell you guys, man, I got smoked yesterday, which a lot of you guys may have too. With that game going off, of course, in a big way for the Raiders, putting up over 60 points. Unexpected game script, let's say, for that one. So I am feeling awful. Had a few too many wobbly pops to compensate for how bad I felt how that slate went. So I'm swimming right now, but we're going to dust ourselves off, get back in the mix as we always do here. And of course, this is a slate, guys, where the Broncos are on. And it also is a slate, by the way, where I do believe there's going to be a lot of Colts ownership. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this spot, we talk a lot about the Broncos defense, how not good it is. This week, again, we are seeing a high total for Detroit. 26.3 implied points has been as high as 26.8 so far this week. Jared Goff in this situation seems like a guy that going back indoors is going to be a positive thing for him. I really do believe that with the amount of the teams that are going to be representing the Colts this weekend, a lot of Pittman shares, a lot of Zach Moss shares. As a result, I do expect there to be more Gardner Minshew shares. Should be a decent spot to get lower ownership on Jared Goff, especially when you look at the box score. Last two games, not looking that good. The 8-pointer against Chicago, certainly a bad one, given that Chicago does have a soft pass defense, even though they, much like Denver, have gotten better results over the last month, let's say, for Denver, more so the last 2 months. But in the spot for Jared Goff, being back indoors again, I think a key thing, having the weapons, and still going against a Denver team that on the year, the EPAs have come down a lot. Negative 0.03 EPA per dropback, negative 0.03 EPA per pass, but still good enough to attack for a quality Detroit offense. So I am going to go with Jared Goff as my QB. We'll see if we can figure it out. As I mentioned earlier, I do believe that Zach Moss and Michael Pittman will be chalk. Did look at some of the projections quickly just to wrap my head around both slates at once because, again, today we're going to do the Saturday video or Saturday slate on this video. Then right after this video ends, it's going to transfer you over to another video to do the main slate content. So we're going to talk about both today, but I had to break them up for the sake of discovery, and it seemed like a better idea yesterday than it does today, especially as a sleepy, hungover boy. Shout out to the chat, by the way. Let's get it. What's up, Spags? Raiders Spike Week make Robert Griffin the turd spurt. That's all. Squirt. That's all I can ask for here is to see people in our chat squirting away. Well, let's go Zach Moss here. Zach Moss, I think another solid play. Of course, we've talked about the red zone role. Has had upwards of, I think, 12 touches within the last 2 weeks inside the red zone. None of them paying off too well. At a certain point, it does have to go that well or go better for him, rather. It does seem also like a spot going against Pittsburgh that we expect the Colts to move the ball. Decent implied total for the Colts in this spot. 22 implied points. Pittsburgh, of course, blitzes at a high rate. Professional QB like Gardner Minshew, you would hope, should be able to stave off that blitz and get the ball downfield. So Zach Moss, we know what we're running into here. We know that he has been a disappointment the last few weeks. Of course, under 10 points. This one's still a Jonathan Taylor. So at least he had the excuse for being under 10 points in that one. But Zach Moss, the Sklansky Bucks have been racking up. The theoretical value of him as a play has been there for the last few weeks, but I still think we should chase it one more week here. Zach Moss makes the lineup. Michael Pittman going to be chalky once again. I think he's still a good play here. Obviously, against the blitz as well, you are going to try to get guys targeted in spaces where the blitzer is coming from. And Michael Pittman, a little bit of a lower A-dot, short target guy, could certainly get there and be that one. Josh Downs has been coming down a little bit recently, no pun intended. As Alec Pierce has come up, so I feel like Pittman at least has the most secure role. Of course, over 10 targets the last 4 games, over 11 targets the last 4 games. So Michael Pittman in the spot will be the next guy we plug in. We're going to figure out some other ways to save money because Pittman is pretty pricey now at $7,300. Interesting to note for sure on that one. It's fucking Squirt Squad, Splishy Splashy Punani plays Friday, yeah. I will read that out loud because Tyler deserves that respect, but boy, I regret reading that out loud. Other players to put in here. Who else can we get to? Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is on the thumbnail, player I never have an issue getting to. 9 targets last week, caught just 3 of them. The workload's been there. The upside has not been. I have to tell you guys, full disclosure, Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the chalkiest plays for me in terms of my best ball playoff teams. He is advancing heavily for me, underdog and DraftKings. So playing him on DraftKings, I don't mind, but I do think a lot of my best ball season is going to come down to Amon-Ra. I think he's an obvious play, though, and I'm wondering if we can get different and go to Sam Laporta instead. In the matchup against Denver, let's see, who's going to benefit the most? Tight ends do benefit the most against Denver's defense. 0.37 EPA, 11% target share in terms of what's going to tight ends, 45% target share to the slot, 11% EPA. Out wide is where they really give up the least targets. Just 25% of the targets funnel that wide against Denver's defense. So I think Laporte is an interesting play. You probably do have to play two guys here. But let's fade him. I'm doing this for myself. Let's fade Amon-Ra here. I still think Amon-Ra is a great play. Don't think we can afford him in this build with Michael Pittman. So I am actually going to go a little bit cheaper. And this is a really pricey wide receiver slate. We have Amon-Ra, we have Jefferson, we have Chase. So lots of ways you can go and spend a lot of money at the position. But let's go to Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams involved enough, certainly a cheap player. The workload, one target is not great. But I do think Jameson Williams is one of those guys that against Denver, just a team that cannot defend the ball downfield. They have been giving up a lower rate of downfield passes the season has gone on, now giving up just 5% of their attempts, allowing over 20 air yards. They're still giving up a 0.5 EPA on those plays, 15% touchdown rate, 28 air yards per attempt when a player is throwing more than 20 air yards against them. So I think that's a good Jameson Williams spot. And again, we're trying to get leverage on Amon-Ra St. Brown and this Goff stack. So that's where we're going with it. I don't feel the most comfortable about this build, but it's Saturday football. What are we going to do? Hockenson Laporte double tight end is a fun way to build. Okay. I think that's noteworthy for sure. We do have a more professional QB or just a pure passer in terms of Nick Mullins at QB for the Vikings this week. Kind of think that benefits Jefferson more, but we'll find out, obviously. Certainly, Hockenson getting a guy who can actually throw him the ball compared to what Josh Dobbs has kind of degenerated into over the last few weeks. Definitely going to be a positive for him. We do have to get another running back in, though. Who could be our running back? Obviously, a decent matchup for the I'm going to go Ty Chandler, I think. Alexander Madison out this week. Huge bummer for me because he's actually one of the guys that advanced good amount for me in best ball as well. Ty Chandler, not a part of my portfolio, but Chandler against the Bengals D that we know is not very good. And Chandler himself has been pretty solid on the year. Negative 0.04 EPA per rush, negative 0.02 EPA per pass. So not positive EPA numbers, but close enough to average that I think he's not going to be a meaningful drop off from Madison, who's a negative 0.15 EPA per rush, negative 0.24 EPA per pass guy. So if he just picks up Madison's workload, Madison on the year getting 16 intended touches per game. The red zone work from 2.6 red zone touches a game. I think Ty Chandler is a pretty strong play. Wish he were a little bit cheaper, but he works here at 5,300. So let's go with him. Bengals allow spikes to tight ends. They do, but the rate though, target rate's 11%. I definitely have targeted tight ends against Cincinnati a lot. Cincinnati and Dallas are the two tight end matchups that are ones I go out of my way to try to go against a little bit more, just especially for Dallas, because that's the only spot they give up production, really. But I think in this situation, let's see. Can we afford Hockenson? I think we can afford him. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. For our guy, Robert Griffin III, why not? How could we resist a little Hockenson here? We have to get leverage on something, though. On defense, I would think. Where's the ownership going to be? Ownership is going to be going Cincinnati's way, it looks like. So let's go Vikings D. Vikings D has shown some flashes of good things recently. I think they're certainly, not a defense you're afraid of by any stretch, but certainly a defense that can be a little bit opportunistic on the year. Really limiting QB rush as well. Negative 0.13 per QB rush. Anytime you see a negative EPA on QB rushes, of course, EPA, the expected points added metric that I always swear by here, that tells you how much above average or below average a defense or an offensive player is going to be. Minnesota's defense, I think, actually looks pretty interesting. They get a good amount of pressure, 22% pressure rate. They blitz at a 47% rate. Jake Browning going to probably throw a lot of checkdowns, a lot of the swing passes to Jamar Chase in this game. I think the defense makes sense here. So let's go with Vikings D. We got one more slot here for wide receiver. Cortland Sutton as the bring back. Cortland Sutton does get the most red zone targets for sure in this Denver offense. Not a great player by any stretch. You don't see slate breaking upside from him that often. We, in fact, have only seen him go over 20 once this year. So it's maybe not the biggest cosign for Cortland Sutton. Man, do I like Sutton that much? I don't want to belabor this one because we do have two videos to do today. Let's just go with Cortland Sutton here. This will be the final team. Jared Goff, Zach Moss, Ty Chandler, Michael Pittman. We have Jameson Williams, Cortland Sutton, Sam Laporta, TJ Hockenson, Vikings D. This is our Saturday build. And now we will find out if we are chalk donkeys or courageous heroes here. Here we go. Raise it saying kind of like the Detroit onslaught without Amon-Ra, which you built so far, and assume with the Lions moving ball a lot. Gibbs or Monty has a touchdown or two. That's true. I did not put Gibbs or Montgomery in this one. I guess I'm hoping to really consolidate. I mean, this would have to be like Jameson Williams breaks 2 long touchdowns, Laporta breaks 1, and then somebody else gets one. Maybe Goff throws touchdown to like a Reynolds or somebody like that. So I think we're going for the same thing, but I agree the running back touches rather in the red zone, very hard to ignore for Detroit with how they play. But look at the projections here, and we'll see again. Michael Pittman going to be really popular, it seems like. 18.5 projection for him on Stochastic. On ETR, let me check that as well. ETR's got an even higher projection for him and slightly more ownership as well. So it does seem like Pittman looks like a strong play no matter what site you are playing on. Amon-Ra St. Brown also looking like a strong play as well, but definitely going to be a chalky Michael Pittman week. ETR has him for just shy of 46% ownership as well. So Pittman, certainly a play that we talked about before. Like, I love Michael Pittman. He's been very good for my best ball portfolio, especially relative to obviously the AR drag of it all. But I would say for Pittman, he's not a guy that you're really worried about him putting up 30, maybe 40, where you do have those guys on the slate, where you do have Jamar Chase, you do have Justin Jefferson, you do have Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that is an interesting to note with Pittman. I like Pittman a lot, but I think I might have played into like the good projection receiver where the ceiling isn't there. And I think that's going to be could go for Saturday for sure. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra, Russell Wilson, Jake Browning. These guys are the top 5 projected plays overall. Each of them over 17, but nobody too high. Not too much distance here. So I'm not sure if we're going to get 100% in the cruncher, but we'll find out in a moment. Top value plays on the Saturday slate. Nick Mullins at QB. I do think I will play some Nick Mullins this weekend when I am putting together my full set of lineups. Mullins, a guy that certainly not a great player by any stretch, but has been able to produce outlier games for both himself as well as his receivers. This year, for what he's done for Minnesota, 69% catchable ball rate. So that is a very nice number to see. Again, like we talked about yesterday with Easton Stick, that was the concern. I think we kind of saw that rear its ugly head where he just wasn't an efficient enough QB, getting the ball to guys where they could even make plays. Obviously, he was not even getting the ball out sometimes. For Mullins, though, I feel like he's a vet. He should be able to handle the pressure decently well, should be able to get the ball out. So I use a sneaky play, and I think he's a pretty solid one to go to. And definitely not, going to be well-treaded ground like Jake Browning is that he's played recently. Gardner Minshew, Jake Browning right behind Nick Mullins. So all the QBs are the top values this week besides Javonte Williams. So nobody really going to jump out as a value play, I would think, based on what we're going to see in an optimizer. We'll check that in a moment and find out. Happy Friday indeed. NFL football tomorrow. Going to be a great day. The baby and the wife are going to go out to some Santa village or something with one of her friends, and I'll be hanging out here, degenning on some football, and I'm sure tilted immediately after the first game. There's going to be somebody in the first game that goes off that I'll have none of, and I'll go, God fucking damn it. Last night, man, it was really one of those where the spiraling was real. Long day of work, and then that as a capper, not the most fun. Let's look at the ownership from Stochastic. And of course, if you are unfamiliar with Stochastic data, it is one of the preeminent providers out there of fantasy data as well as tools. I use it on here on stream. And of course, I've been there in some form since the start of their company. But go check out their deals they have going right now. Promo code SPLASH we talked about here. We also have a link in the description for you. You could save 15% on any package. That also includes NBA. It includes all of their sim stuff. It includes all the data packages. So check out that link in the description down below and check out Stochastic as well, the promo code SPLASH if you want to save 15% on there and do the same process that I do here on stream. Pittman, going to be the chalk play according to Stochastic, 45% ownership expecting to him. Zach Moss, 40% as well going his way. Amon-Ra St. Brown, chalky too at 39%. So at least we got leverage on one part of it, even though we did play into the chalkiest parts of the Saturday build, it seems. Jamar Chase, number 4 here. Jamar Chase, 34%. Number 5, TJ Hockenson, 34% for him as well. So definitely some chalk players here. I think you can kind of see how that build would go. I would imagine that you do see Minshew tacked on to the Moss Pittman builds a little bit more. So that's probably one way to get unique would be playing like a Nick Mullins with that to try to get different. But definitely star players coming up fairly easily and fairly high owned on Saturday. Low-owned guys you can look at here before we look at the optimizer in a moment. Madison under 10%, so they've not taken him out yet. Trubisky, Alec Pierce, Mims, Troutman. I guess because they have Madison still in, it does seem like you could see a pretty big surge for Ty Chandler here. And I'd actually be pretty comfortable saying that Ty Chandler could be the chalk pairing alongside Zach Moss. So I think we really played into the chalk a little bit too much for that single entry, but what are we going to do? That's what it looks like. Now, how this process goes this year, I think next year what I'm going to try to do when doing these streams is I'm going to do the hand build at the end. And that's going to be the way I try to put the information together. But the way we're doing it this year is just going in blind and going, oh, fuck, I built chalk. And then just losing the $5 or min cashing. That's been a fun ride here every show. So there you go. Those are your guys under 10% though. So some guys who could play. Pierce, we know, has had some upside recently. Obviously came back down to earth last game. Samaje Perine, maybe in a game script where Javonte Williams gets phased out because of the passes being there a little bit more for Samaje Perine. That can make sense. Jameson Williams, big plays. Josh Reynolds, certainly a reliable end zone target. So some low-owned guys you could play, and obviously this Ty Chandler ownership at 2.2% is not going to be relevant and kind of makes this video feel a little bit futile, if I'm being honest. Here's the run of the optimizer, though, and of course, what we're doing with the optimizer is trying to find what the math is going to push people towards the most, not trying to find exactly what the field is going to play, but these are basically how you find out how people get forced on like Javonte Williams a lot more than they realize. When you see Javonte Williams popping up in 100% of the optimizer lineups with just the projections, that's how you know that. So that's what we're trying to do here. You can see right away, Zach Moss, Michael Pittman, Javonte Williams, 3 guys being 100% owned. So if you were to play none of those guys, that's how you get away from a large portion of the field. Again, stochastics projections do represent obviously a median outcome, but projections for the most part across the industry are going to be pretty flat. Stochastics, though, get used, the most, relatively the most, I would say. I don't know. ETRs might be catching up. Certainly Roto Grinders, Saber Sim, all of those get used a good amount as well. But they're used about as much as anybody's out there. So that's why they're a good reflection of how the field's going to land on these plays and not even realize it. And it does seem Moss, Pittman, Javonte Williams is going to be the build. And I would imagine because of Javonte's price and projection, when we do get the boosted projection from Stochastic to Ty Chandler, I would think that Ty Chandler becomes part of a 3 running back build that comes up pretty frequently because we're getting Gibbs in here as a semi-value, but Chandler probably is going to have, if I had to guess, let me go back here and see what they had Madison projected at. They've got Madison projected at 8.57, and they've got Chandler projected at 6.48. So we roll those up and take a little bit off the top. It would probably be Ty Chandler around a 14-point projection, which would make him a better value metric than Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think that he would get in the flex on a lot of these. But again, you are seeing a lot of Gardner Minshew, or at least some Gardner Minshew up top. Russ Minshew. So you're getting 4 of the QBs here. You are not getting Mitch. We are not letting Mitch cook in the optimizer, apparently. But that seems like that's one way to get low owned. Would be to play to play Mitch Trubisky. That's not a thing I want to cape for necessarily, but that is going to be a way to get lower owned here because he's not coming up naturally with the projections. He does have easy stack targets to go with Pickens, with Deontay Johnson, with Freiermuth, even with Jalen Warren and Najee if you want to go that way as well. Team stack. So what is the configuration we're getting here? So 21 out of 25 lineups have at least 3 Colts in it. So that is definitely something where you want to get away from the field right away. Playing just 2 Colts is going to be the way to do that. Obviously, the 2 Colts that'll come up everywhere are going to be Moss and Pittman. So if you are not playing one of Moss or Pittman, you could play more Colts and not worry about being quite as chalky. But the chalky build is going to be using these guys, using these Colts players as well projected plays that I think the ceiling is a lot lower than the projection, especially for Pittman. That, like Zach Moss, if they can have a 3 touchdown day, that would not be the most shocking thing in the world. At least a 2, if not a 3. In the range of outcomes, to be clear. Not saying I'm expecting that, but I think in this spot, it really does scream out like too many Colts and, well, yeah, Broncos coming up a little bit. You're getting 2 Broncos and a lot. You're getting 18 out of 25 lineups have at least 2 Broncos. So it's not as big of a deal as, as 21 out of 25 having at least 3 Colts. Like when you see more of one team in here that's coming up naturally, that tells me right away that that's like the baseline of trying to get less than that team. So I think playing less than 3 Colts is going to be a key thing as well. But you could also play less Broncos, and that wouldn't be the worst thing where you limit yourself only to 1 Bronco, because it seems like you're going to get Javonte. You're also going to get Russ. You might get one of the pass catchers. We're getting Judy coming up a little bit. Not getting Cortland Sutton very much, so he does seem like a little bit lower owned, but it does seem like Colt's going to be the thing that really stands out with these projections coming up in an optimizer. Always a fun ride. Thank you. I appreciate that. Is Downs no longer a good play, or is he an upside play? Let me look at his snap count, because I think he's definitely, the target share has come down pretty substantially. Obviously, Pittman's has come up. Pierce has come up. Downs still played 50 snaps last game compared to 55 for Pittman. So he's like right there. I mean, that's 5 less routes. Pierce played 58. So Pierce played the most routes, or played the most snaps rather. So he's coming down, but I don't think it's a thing where you're really worried about him necessarily. I do think the projections, though, are a little bit off with how his workload has been, where he just hasn't getting the targets recently. The volume under 5 for 5 straight games is pretty tough. I think he got hurt in this Carolina game. So he's not the same player as he was early in the year, and I think the projections are carrying a little bit too much of the early part of the year, but obviously that can always course correct back this week. It's just we're looking at 5 weeks now in a row of him not having that big target share when he was like upwards of a 10 target guy earlier in the year. So I think he's still a good play, but like if he comes up easily, I think you'd rather have Pierce at this point because Downs is probably not the same player he was earlier in the year, and Pierce is certainly looking ascendant in terms of the opportunity. But Pierce himself, like, you know, he had that great game 2 weeks ago and was right back down to the usual kind of morass of shit, even though the 4.2 score here, the 420, never going to look bad. All right, let's look at the Sims next. Guys, smash the like button if you can. I would appreciate it a bunch here, of course. Really flustered, honestly, trying to do these 2 videos at once. I think if I did it as 1 video, it would have felt a lot more casual, but trying to do the best I can and cover it for you guys. So please smash that like button if you can. Splash Play on the march to 4K subs, now on the march to 5K subs, 10K subs, 1 million K subs here. And I could not do it without you guys. So please hit that like button and, of course, subscribe and hit the join button if you can as well. Top simmed lineups here, getting sorted by ROI. We got Russell Wilson coming up in the first one. Russell Wilson, Joe Mixon, Zach Moss, Pittman, Pickens, Judy, Hockenson, Javonte Williams, Broncos. So we are still getting 2 Broncos in this one, or no, 3 Broncos. So we're getting more than the average amount of Broncos. We are getting the expected so we are getting 2 Colts. So I think that does stand out then because 3 Colts occur too easily. So the sim is giving you 2 Colts. That's definitely helped me, I think, feel more solid in my claims of always trying to play less than what the field is going to get in an optimizer. Let's look at the top 150 lineups though and see how the exposures look. Sims really love Javonte Williams, 77%. Again, do you think that comes down a little bit or at least gets added onto by Ty Chandler when they reflect that in the projections? Again, the projections right now are reflecting Madison in, but for a lower projection and Ty Chandler not getting the full projection that he will have when they fix that. Moss here coming up a lot, though not as much as Javonte. I frankly would trust Moss more than Javonte. I know Javonte has been getting a good workload as well, but Moss has been like the only running back that's being used. And again, against a blitz-heavy team as well, it's going to benefit Pittman the most, I would think, but Moss can easily get some checkdowns there as long as he's not being kept in the block. So I think Zach Moss, I would prefer him to Javonte, but the Sims certainly going the other way. Pickens coming up a lot. I am a little surprised by Pickens. We do see a lot of explosive plays given up by the Colts on the year, but Pickens certainly a guy that is basically, he's better projected. That's interesting. Stochastic has Pickens higher projected than Deontay Johnson, but ETR has Deontay Johnson slightly higher projected than Pickens. So could be a tale of 2 sites there with the data they're giving you. But I think that Pickens, to me, fundamentally the same play as Deontay Johnson because it just relies on the QB getting them the ball. And the QB is not able to do that for either of them reliably other than when Pickens was the only receiver out there for that stretch of the year. So I think for Pickens, there's a lot of ownership going his way, and I'm not sure I'm buying in quite as much. Hockenson, though, looks good. Laporta looks good. So you probably will get some Hockenson and Laporta lineups together, but both guys clearly a cut above the rest of the tight ends on the slate. All right, let's see. Any fun lineups to look at here for this before we do our 3 takeaways and then go do the main slate video? Let's look at some Nick Mullins lineups. Let's do that. Because I think that's the one that stands out where there's a lot of opportunity there. You're also just going to be able to get off the beaten path in a major way. And then if Nick Mullins hits and he's taking Hockenson and Justin Jefferson with him, like that's obviously going to be a thing that pulls you away from Pittman, that pulls you away from Amon-Ra even. So I think Mullins is going to be an interesting play to look at here. This Mullins build here, Mullins +2, Nick Mullins, Zach Moss, Najee Harris, Justin Jefferson, Cortland Sutton, Pickens, Hockenson, Javonte Williams, Broncos. I like that lineup. I think it gets duped a little bit here. 3-game slate. 3-game slate is not exactly like a showdown. 2-game slate is closer to a showdown, but you could get unique enough, I would think. And playing Najee is probably your uniqueness lever for this one, as well as just playing, I think, 2 of the Steelers. But we're also not playing as much of the Colts. We're not playing Michael Pittman. So I think this is actually a unique lineup. I like that one as right away as one you could take and has, of course, a 153% ROI on it. Other teams that we can look at here, I'm going to look at Jared Goff as well. Really think, too, that if Goff's ownership right now, they have him projected for 16%, which would make him what on the slate? Yeah, Goff is expected to be the second lowest owned QB on the slate. You know, Trubisky's the only one under 10. I think Jared Goff is a really strong play here. And I think, again, people just really do think this Broncos defense is better than I do. I think the analytics certainly are starting to go more that way because the sample size now accumulated enough of them just getting these matchups. I would say a lot of it was luck, but obviously recent weeks, you can make the case that some of it is also them playing a little bit better too. I have to take my lumps on that. But QB +4 for Detroit is kind of wild. You do not see QB +4 pop up that often. And on a shorter slate like this one, you're really trying to target the outlier performances, whether it be in a game or just one team just going nuts, and kind of like the Raiders did yesterday. Jared Goff here, Jalen Warren, Zach Moss, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Downs, Khalif Raymond, Sam Laporta, Gibbs, and Bengals. So we're saying that Goff is doing enough to make production for Amon-Ra, for Khalif Raymond and Laporta. And then Gibbs also could get some pass game work and also some red zone touchdowns. So I think that this lineup makes sense. That is scary to play a QB +4. And I probably wouldn't play one on a main slate. Even a QB +3 can get a little bit thin on a main slate. For a Saturday slate, we were just trying to capture that one game environment. It's interesting to note that Goff QB +4 comes up this highly because I don't think I've seen a QB +4 come up at any point. Tua was getting a few, but that's about it. How do you feel about that double Pittsburgh running back team? Not great. Not great. I mean, obviously, I like having Jared Goff with it. I think that is a way as well that you are playing into the Colts not getting there, is that they basically are just punching in touchdowns over and over again, and then Michael Pittman doesn't get there somehow, and then Zach Moss obviously would get less work just because of the fact that running backs pull from each other. So it's not a build I would try to get to, but if the Sims are saying it's a strong enough build, I think it's worth playing a little bit of. But obviously, I would defer to saying, like, I'm getting it here. I probably wouldn't hand build a Najee and Jalen Warren lineup. And it's a little bit thin, but they do different things. And it is a pure 50-50 share. And that's obviously a way to get leverage on the Colts. So I think it fits overall, but it does feel a bit uncomfortable, which is why it's probably a good tournament lineup. Anybody else to look at here? Lions scoring 63. I hope, honestly, based on how my best ball exposures are, that would be the best thing in the world for me. Jared Goff cost me a lot of teams advancing, and now he's still on these teams that advanced, and he can maybe do something good for me this weekend. We'll find out. We'll look at the lowest owned QB, Mitch Trubisky. Mitch here, 241% ROI, QB +3. Mitch, Jalen Warren, Javonte Williams, Michael Pittman, Deontay Johnson, Pickens, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bengals. So you're fading Zach Moss. You do have Pittman in here, but again, you only have one Colt. So you're not going Colts crazy, which is going to be a key way just to carve yourself away from the field overall. This lineup makes sense. I actually like these Saturday lineups more than I did hand building the one that I did in the beginning of this video. All right, 3 takeaways here. Then we're going over the main slate video, and you will be automatically redirected here, so stay tuned. And I pretend like you haven't seen me before, and we start the new stream. But your 3 takeaways for this slate to get unique, to build uniquely. Don't be afraid to overstack. That's it. We saw QB +4 with Jared Goff having a huge ROI on that one. So very noteworthy to see that. You don't see that very often. Again, I also believe that this Broncos D getting results that are a little bit above their head, still not covering guys well, still allowing outlier performances like Nico Collins, always going for 200 against them. Don't get misdirected by how badly the Chargers played against them last week. I think it's a spot where obviously we know what the Chargers are now after seeing what they did Thursday, but yesterday. But it feels like at the spot, like I think the Broncos D not as good as it seems, and Jared Goff in particular, I like the +4s, but really overstacking in general. Whatever QB you want to choose, like Nick Mullins as well, very live to overstack too. I think any of these guys, Jake Browning, you could overstack him if you want. But just trying to capture that game environment and really pin it down, I think is one way to get unique here and really, hopefully get yourself away from the field. Number 2 would be playing less than 3 Colts. Like 3 Colts are going to come up pretty easily. Gardner Minshew, Zach Moss, Michael Pittman going to be the configuration, but also Josh Downs, also Alec Pierce to some amount. So just keep that in mind. The Colts are sort of the chalky baseline. If you play less Colts, you're going to get more unique. Or if you really lean in on the Colts, it's another way to get unique. But I think that's the issue sometimes, that the field ends up leaning in a little bit too much, then it ends up making the play less good as a result. So I would say playing less Colts, ideally 2 or less would be what I would try to do to make sure you're getting away from the largest pockets of the field. Last but not least, number 3, I think I don't know if this is really a thing to get unique. You really need to dial in on your stacks is what I would say, where like you're trying to get a mix of Mullins, you're trying to get Trubisky. I think you're trying to get like a mix of obviously Jared Goff, who I like the most on the slate. You're trying to get all these guys because I think that, again, it's all about that game environment stuff. And I would really even push towards maybe even having flat QB exposures because we just don't have like the mobile QB who's going to break everything. And people are going to be playing a lot of Russ. Russ's upside has been kind of capped for the most part. He runs, but he's not putting up 30-point days very often. I think he's only done it once this year. So for Russell Wilson, like, I think if he's going to be a chalk QB, and it does seem like that's the case, I'd rather just play any other QB and see how it goes. I think is how I feel about it. Kind of like the Monday night doubleheader slate where Tua was coming up so obviously, and he's not a guy that runs. So as a result, you just want to play any other QB that maybe has a shot at that upside. Tommy DeVito ends up winning it all in that one. For this slate, like it could be Mitch that wins it all, and it would not shock me at all. So just play other QBs, I think, and just spread it. I think keep it flat for your can ownership wise. But there we go, guys. That's going to be your Saturday slate video, of course. Main slate coming up in a moment. Before we go, though, please subscribe down below. And of course, thank you to the Squirt Squad. Help me put on both videos today. New names being added every day. Hit the join button down below, $4.99 a month, and you'll be getting all of the things that I do here on Splash Play, and of course, helping support the show here, helping me do this as an independent creator. It means a lot. All right, guys, next video coming up in a moment, so let's hit that outro. I'll see you over there. Automatically redirected coming up in a moment. Bye-bye. Good luck.